Hello and welcome to Economically Speaking, where we break down stories behind the policies shaping Nigeria's economy. I'm your host, Faiza Sanni, and today's episode takes us into a constitutional proposal with serious implications. A bill that could give Nigerian states more control over their own natural resources. It's not making headlines everywhere, but in the world of governance, the bill is raising some big questions. Joining me to unpack this are three brilliant guests. We have Nonye Ofili, the head of the NESA podcast team, and we have Anthonia, Origho, the NESA treasurer, and Chukwudalu, Orafu, AAT. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's start from the beginning. The bill mentions changing the constitution, and that sounds like a big deal. What parts of the constitution are they trying to change, and why should that matter to the everyday Nigerians?
All right, that's a good question. So it involves moving item 39 in the constitution from the exclusive legislative list to the concurrent legislative list. What does this mean? Basically saying that the lawmaking authority of natural resources right now in Nigeria is held by the federal government. But now this is moving this authority to the federal and state governments rather than just the federal government.
Wow. So what does this mean for the states? Would they finally have a bigger say in how their resources are being used? And how would they be able to do that? How would they be in charge of what's going underground?
Well, that refers to the states will have more legislative power and authority when it comes to resource control. They also have the authority to issue resource license in the sense that with federal agencies, of course, they can decide on who is getting what contracts in what area when it comes to resource allocation in states.
Wow. So would this shift in control, will it be able to grow the state's local economies? What kind of impact are we talking about here? Would there be more impact in education, skill centers for the youth, schools? What kind of impacts are we looking on for the states?
Okay, so it's important to note that there are going to be positive and negative impacts on the states when it comes to the issuing of this new bill. So a very important impact to notice is that a lot of states are going to finally have more internally generated revenue as opposed to the trend of borrowing in Nigerian states. So a lot of these states are finally going to be able to see an increased control over their own resources when it comes to having industrial plants that's going to process these resources, so we can reduce the level of exporting natural resources and increasing an export of more capital goods. That's the refined level of these natural resources. So we can also see increased training or increased employment, especially in factories that are going to process, or even people that are going to harvest these natural resources from the individual states. However, it's important to also note that there's going to be a sort of regional disparity, and also there are going to be some lags because states that already have Nigeria being a country that is 90%, Nigeria's internally generated revenue is 90% oil. So countries in the south, states in the south that are mostly oil producing, like Bayelsa and Rivers State, they already have existing plants or existing methods of getting this oil, and in some cases even refining this oil. However, states that are not oil producing and do not necessarily have a plant or an industry for refining the raw materials particular to their state, they are going to face a new need to get funds to create these processing plants and then even process their resources.
Yeah, how insightful.
I'd like to add something to that. Another negative impact is the risk of corruption. So now let's see, states have a bigger say in handling natural resources in the country. So it makes it easier for them to part away with some of the revenue gotten from natural resources.
Talking about foreign countries, are there other regions? Are there other countries where regions or states help manage natural resources, and how does it work in places like that?
Of course, for countries like the United States and Canada, they practice a federal system of government. So the states and regions that make up that country actually have authority over legislature, especially on resource control and allocation. And that has actually helped them make really efficient policies and regulation regarding like resources like timber. Canada has maple trees. The United States has its own oil, right? So also from the aspect of environmental protection, definitely the states and the regions are the ones who are closer to the people, so they understand how exactly these resources affect the average person, like the average local. So definitely they are better suited to make policies to protect their environment and just be more sustainable in the processing methods and everything. Yeah.
So if the states want to take on this new responsibility now, what do they need to do to be able to shoulder this burden?
Well, I would advise the states to do research, to do proper research, and just get as much knowledge as they can on that specific area or field, because the more they know, the better their decisions are. Because for example, in what I mentioned previously about issuing licenses, they are going to be better prepared to appoint companies or give out contracts to companies that are best in line with not only efficiency but also with sustainable practices that for their specific state or region. So yes, it has to do with getting the knowledge and also creating efficient systems that decrease corruption while at the same time enhance the welfare and the the quality of living of the individuals in each state or region.
I totally agree. So as we wrap up, what do we want to leave our listeners with? What kind of takeaway do you want to leave our listeners with? For students like us, young professionals and everyday citizens, what's the one thing that they should understand about this bill?
So the key word I would like everyone to take home with is inclusivity. Every state has a role to play in how the economy runs. Every state has control of their natural resources. So every state is responsible for the wealth of their economy. For example, now we have states like Rivers and Bayelsa, which you all know they have oil. So how efficiently they manage resources will translate to the wealth of their citizens and the wealth of the economy in that state.
To buttress Dalu's point on inclusivity, yes, these reforms are definitely going to bring the government closer to the people. But specifically for young students and young professionals in their career, we have to look at the opportunities, the employment opportunities, and that is not just employment opportunities like going to a company to ask for a job, also your own self-employment opportunities, like looking at policies like this where the government is navigating to can also help you think on what solutions you can offer to the government. Like I mentioned previously that the government has to do research to know the right fits for the companies and also for like legislations and things like that. Also as individuals, we can offer services and help to not just the government, to companies and also individuals who are in this sector. That is what we can do as young professionals to just aid our career, like just streamline yourself, like okay, let me do like something that has to do with oil generation or transformation, something like that. And yeah, it's more easy for you to get a job or do something positively within your community.
Okay. Yeah. And another thing to add is that for companies and even also individuals who have expertise on energy especially, there's going to be an increased need for renewable or very cost-efficient energy, especially when it comes to processing plants of all forms of natural resources. So there's now there's a gap that has been created for people to now fill, for people to come in with their proposed energy options, their proposed processing options. So there's going to be a higher level of innovation available to the average person or even to people who are willing to bring in foreign expertise which can increase the FDI in the country. Yeah.
This discussion was so insightful, and that brings us to the end of today's episode of Economically Speaking. This bill represents a significant proposal in Nigerians' ongoing conversation about resource governance and federalism. While it's still moving through the legislative process, it's a moment that invites careful thought and public engagement. A big thank you to our guests Nonye, Chukwudalu, and Anthonia for helping us explore the key issues and what they could mean for Nigeria's future. If you found this episode helpful, we'd love it if you subscribed, shared it with a friend, or left us a review. Your support helps us keep these conversations going. And before you go, remember this: change doesn't always start in the House of Representatives. Sometimes it starts with a single question in a group chat or even in class. If this bill could reshape how Nigeria manages its wealth, then it could reshape opportunity, as Nonye said, especially for young people. So stay curious, speak up, and don't wait for headlines to tell you when to care. Until next time, I'm Faiza, Sanni, and this has been Economically Speaking.